Ladies and gentlemen, the CARICOM Diplomatic Heads of Mission in Canada present CARICOM Canada Policy Forum, Strengthening a Resilient Partnership Post-COVID-19. Her Excellency Sharon J. Miller to Canada.
To be hosted by the CARICOM Heads of Mission in Canada, with high-level members of the Canadian public and private sectors, along with developmental experts from CARICOM. Today's forum will focus on strengthening a resilient partnership between CARICOM and Canada post-COVID-19. I am joined by the members of the group of CARICOM heads, their Excellencies Sarah Truss from St. Kitts and Nevis, Waimbert Authus from Haiti, Dennis Moses from Trinidad and Tobago, Kenneth Russell from the Bahamas, Chargé d'Affaires Marsha Cadet from Guyana, and Andre Padmore from Barbados. CARICOM Canada relations are of utmost importance to our governments and people. Canada has demonstrated over the years its commitment to being a reliable partner, actively engaged in our development efforts. With the advent of COVID-19, both CARICOM and Canada have agreed that the pandemic has created what could easily be described as the perfect storm, with our countries facing, at the same time, multiple crises in healthcare and the economy. Considering the current environment forced upon us by the pandemic, CARICOM heads of mission, looking towards the post-pandemic period, thought it useful to get experts to delve into some of the key issues, such as health security, climate change, sustainable and inclusive economic growth. It is within this framework that our forum sits, asking, how should the partnership be strengthened? And what are some of the remedies to be pursued to further our sustainable development efforts? To assist in untangling some of these issues and to identify a possible path forward, our panelists this morning are Senator, the Honorable Dr. Rosemary Moody, Dr. Deodat Marahaj, and Dr. Angus Friday. Senator Moody was appointed to the Senate of Canada in 2018 as an independent senator representing Ontario. She sits on the Standing Committee of Agriculture and Forestry and co-chairs the Canada CARICOM Parliamentary Friendship Group. Senator Moody is Jamaican born, a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians of Canada and of the American Academy of Pediatrics. She is a well-recognized national and international medical leader. As a strong advocate for women and girls, Senator Moody has supported organizations and stakeholders in policy development and advocacy to improve health equity and expand health care quality access to the most vulnerable populations. Her expertise also includes healthcare planning locally and internationally. Among our many awards are the Order of Distinction, Commander Rank from the Government of Jamaica, the Order of Ontario, and the Ontario Medical Association's Glenn Sawyer Community Service Award. Dr. Deodat Marahaj, a national of Trinidad and Tobago, is the Executive Director of the Caribbean Export Development Agency. He has extensive experience in international trade, working with the private sector, governments, and multilateral institutions in a career spanning more than 25 years. He knows the region well, having lived and worked in Barbados, Guyana, Suriname, and Trinidad and Tobago. He has also served with the Caribbean Development Bank. As the Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth, he spearheaded the trade and investment agenda across its developing country membership in the Caribbean, the Pacific, Africa, and Asia. Dr. Marahaj understands the vital role of the private sector as a key driver and partner in development, especially in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. He also recognizes the importance of creating an enabling environment for business to succeed and the imperative of attracting foreign direct investment in regions such as ours. We hope to welcome him soon, given technical difficulties. Dr. Angus Friday is a medical doctor and an accomplished Blue Economy leader and practitioner. He now serves as the Blue Economy Director for the Waite Institute and has worked in many multilateral development agencies. He was the World Bank's ocean representative and worked with the Dutch government and FAO in establishing the Global Blue Growth Network. He also played a leading role in developing the Blue Grenada program, which contributed to the World Bank's first fiscal resilience and blue growth development policy credit. Also at the World Bank, Dr. Friday helped to establish a $30 million trust fund for renewable energies in small island developing states. In 2017, he was instrumental in assisting Caribbean governments in establishing the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator. In working with the Green Climate Fund and New York University, he assisted in the development of the first phase of St. George's establishment as the region's first climate smart capital city. He also served as Grenada's ambassador to the United Nations and Mexico, High Commissioner to Canada, and permanent resident to the United Nations, where he was selected as chairman of AOSIS, a climate negotiating bloc of 44 small island developing states. Before we hear from our panelists, however, and in keeping with the friendly relations between our countries and Canada, the Honorable Robert Oliphant, Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Canada, will bring greetings from the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. After which, H.E. Terry Truss, Dean of the CARICOM Group in Ottawa and an experiment in international development, will moderate the rest of the forum.
High Commissioner Truss, Excellencies, it's an honor and great privilege to attend the CARICOM Canada Policy Forum in celebration of the 48th anniversary of the Caribbean community. The Caribbean community is a deeply valued and long-standing partner to Canada. Our strong relationship is built on trust and on constructive dialogue, on strong economic ties, cooperation on regional security, and through addressing climate change and other important issues. It's also based on important people-to-people bonds. People are at the heart of our relationship. That includes the diaspora here in Canada, students, visitors going both ways. Almost 1 million people of Caribbean descent now call Canada home, and we're proud of that. The COVID-19 pandemic has had significant impact on Canada and the Caribbean alike, and addressing the challenges ahead remain crucial to this relationship. Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Gould have recently announced that over 30 million vaccine doses will be shared with low and middle income countries through the COVAX facility. These doses will help accelerate deliveries to low and lower middle income countries in the Caribbean and Latin America, while also helping priority countries in other regions. Commitments to redirect additional excess doses internationally will be made as more and more Canadians are vaccinated at home. While fighting the pandemic remains our top priority, climate change continues to threaten our health, our way of life, and our planet. Canada stands at the ready to take bold action with you, with CARICOM partners, to protect the environment, build a healthier and cleaner future, and to create new jobs and a stronger economy for all. We've had unprecedented high-level engagement this past year, with the Canada CARICOM Foreign Ministers Group meeting in February, Canada CARICOM Senior Officials Dialogue, numerous bilateral calls between our ministers, and bilateral consultations with 12 CARICOM members just since November. This momentum will continue. For Canada, the path ahead is clear. We will continue to grow our friendship, to deepen our ties, and to work together on the issues and concerns that matter the most to CARICOM and its member states. Thank you once again for the opportunity to celebrate with you today, and I wish you great success for what promises to be a meaningful CARICOM Canada Policy Forum. Je vous remercie.
Thank you, High Commissioner Miller, and a big thank you to the Honorable Rob Oliphant for really sharing with us a message that underscores the importance and the long-standing nature of the Canada-CARICOM relationship. As many of you know, that relationship started in the 1700s. That began with trade, the Caribbean sending rum and molasses to Canada, Canada sending back lumber and cod. And that trading relationship then led to a banking relationship where we had some of the Canadian banks, Royal Bank of Canada, Scotiabank opening branches in Caribbean capitals before they even opened branches in Toronto. So we've had a relationship that's been based around economic interest, shared values, and people-to-people connections. And because those things have benefited both sides, the partnership has been one that has been nurtured. Canada has invested in the partnership. CARICOM has invested in the partnership. This past year, with the pandemic raging, CARICOM countries have experienced some new challenges. And much of the challenges that were already existing have been exacerbated. And we've seen a growth in terms of the economic crisis, a debt crisis, a public health crisis. And we've been looking at really constructive ways in which we can build back better, as they say. But we want to build back better, not just as a cliche, but with very concrete ideas and plans about what we can do. And so, looking at this long-standing relationship with Canada, we thought we'd have this discussion today, which looks not just at what has gone, but what we can do together going forward. So, with that in mind, let's start with the issue that's top of mind, the issue of health. And we'll start with Senator Moody. Senator Moody, you've been a pioneer, frankly, and a leader in the medical field. And you are talking about and writing about health equity and access to quality healthcare long before these topics became popular. In the current situation, Canada has very generously given to the COVAX facility, which has benefited CARICOM. But beyond that particular initiative, can you share with us, from your perspective and experience, some measures that can be taken to ensure that the fallout experienced from this pandemic is not repeated in the future? And where do you see opportunities for improving health security?
Thank you very much, High Commissioner Tross, for bringing us together for this really important conversation. And High Commissioner Miller, thanks for your warm introduction. Just to talk very quickly about some of the challenges that we have seen, as you point out, and many have mentioned before, in addition to the health service impact, there was food insecurity and some really specific concerns around increased sexual and gender-based violence and thousands of children out of school. So a really broad, widespread issue that is challenging the region and many countries around the world as well. When we look at health security, there are already some really strong partnerships that we have together. We're working together to strengthen and mitigate biological threats in the Caribbean, to prevent, detect, and respond to infectious disease outbreaks, to develop some technical solutions for sustainable laboratories and low resource environments. Along with some shared work of interest, antimicrobial resistance, non-communicable diseases, mental health, capacity health promotion, and things like that, all of which are important and strong alliances already that will help prepare us for the future. But an important, very important future concern will be how our public health agencies continue to work together to strengthen our health surveillance systems to protect us against the next threat. When I look at the biological threats that the Caribbean is facing, like the rest of the world, we are going to need to work through resource sharing and enhancing regional capacities to prevent and detect and respond to the infectious disease outbreaks that are coming to us. We in Canada were not ready. We also were challenged with the fact that vaccine access was an initial issue for us, because we were dependent, like a number of countries, on others to manufacture our vaccines, and we were vulnerable to vaccine nationalism. I think that this is an area that is important for us to think about, because although we were able, through our sheer size and economy and our spending power, to rise above that, that is an issue for many countries, especially CARICOM countries. And so we need to be looking at opportunities for shared capacity development, research and manufacturing, ways to improve vaccine access across the regions. I think it's also important for us to look at medical technology and other pandemic necessities, how we are manufacturing those PPEs. And again, to harmonize on appropriate standards for border control, infection control, and things like that. All of those will be the future of how we can share our experiences and our capacity and our knowledge to improve the outcomes.
Thank you, Senator. You raised some really important points, and I want to jump off from that and perhaps ask Dr. Maharaj, given what Senator Moody just reflected upon in terms of vaccine access and the difficulty early on in the pandemic, even for a country as big as Canada, we know that supply chain issues and access issues emerged very early in the pandemic, and quite frankly have continued. Certainly, it's still the case for the Caribbean and many other countries around the world. You think about a lot about how to create business and investment opportunities. In the health space, what are some of the areas you have identified for manufacturing or other partnerships that can perhaps address some of the issues that Senator Moody raised?
Yeah. Thank you so much, High Commissioner, for having me on this very important conversation, fellow panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think at the outset, what I would like to state is that we in the Caribbean, we have had a strong and inextricable historical connection with Canada. I mean, we have strong people-to-people relationships. We have decent, I think, trade and investment relationships. And our relationship, I believe, is anchored in shared values. At the same time, I don't think that when you look at the body and the volume of trade and investment and collaboration, that we are where we need to be to reflect the strength of this partnership. In terms of vaccine and vaccine access, this is another very clear and very specific area. I think Canada, as a very strong friend of the Caribbean, is well placed as well to support and facilitate South-South collaboration and to help with respect to making investments to ensure that we with respect to health-related matters and vaccines and access to vaccines, that we support and facilitate options in terms of manufacturing in developing countries. Canada would have also faced the consequences, as the Senator so eloquently indicated, of vaccine nationalism. And we are seeing the same in the Caribbean and across the developing world. And therefore, what is the answer? The answer is to augment capacities as well in developing countries, whether we are talking about Brazil, whether we're talking about India, whether we're talking about African countries, or right here in the Caribbean. So in addition to strengthening the capacity of regional institutions, such as CARPHA, it's important to make investments in the private sector so business can also deliver vaccines to our populations when they need it most. And we are seeing the consequences of having a policy and excessive reliance on small suppliers, a small group of suppliers living in a different part of the world, and where they have had an imperative to supply their markets in the first instance being based largely in the United States of America and in Europe. And that has to change. And Canada, I think, is well positioned to support us as we seek to identify alternative suppliers and to help build the capacity to produce in developing countries as well.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Maharaj. And I'll throw this to Dr. Friday. The the previous speaker just spoke about augmenting capacities in developing countries, particularly in CARICOM in this case. We have sometimes lagged in research and some other areas. How do you think partnering on health security can be potentially beneficial and add real value for both Canada and CARICOM? How can we augment capacities in our countries to benefit in this space?
Well, High Commissioner Truss, many thanks for having me on the program, and a pleasant good morning to all the excellencies and everyone on this call. Look, I think there's a lot that Canada and the Caribbean can be doing together, and part of this was actually mentioned by the first two speakers. I think first of all, it's about a shift in mindset. In the Caribbean in particular, we tend to treat healthcare as a cost center for social good. And this is important. But what that creates is a reliance on other developed countries for medicines, etc. We don't necessarily see ourselves as part of the solution when it comes to healthcare, even though we have a whole wealth of traditional knowledge around medicines and so, but converting that into an industry, I think, is one of the areas where we've lagged behind. So first of all, to use a phrase coined by the Prime Minister of Barbados, we need to pivot. We need to pivot our mindset and start thinking about healthcare. And as we've clearly seen with COVID, as an area for national security. And secondly, we need to be thinking about it as an area for economic development, not just in terms of managing the downside, i.e., you have concerns around, Zika or dengue or COVID, as we've had, which has completely shut down our economy, our tourism-based economy. We need to think about the economic opportunities that can spring forward from this. So I'd like to just very quickly mention a couple of these. We see that a country like Cuba is actually very advanced in terms of their medical research and development program, their ability to come forward with new drugs, be it for diabetes, new biotech products. And they're even working in the area of COVID as well. HIV/AIDS, the first successful treatment for HIV/AIDS was a drug called AZT, and that actually comes from Caribbean coral reef. So in summary, what we need to be doing is developing first of all, changing the mindset and developing the institutions to look at our traditional sources of knowledge, to look at the wealth of bioactive compounds we have on land and at sea, and to marry that with finance, so that research and development can lead to spin-off opportunities, which can become companies and corporations to export to the rest of the world. So I think this is one of the areas where Canada and the Caribbean can partner more closely. Thank you.
Fantastic. Picking up on what you said, you talked about pivoting the mindset, building capacity, the importance of research and development, and how that can spin off into investment. I want to use that and jump then into building better, more sustainable and inclusive economies. And I'm going to start with Dr. Maharaj, because the fault lines of the pandemic, I think, highlighted where we have some challenges, both at the level of policy and practice. But at the same time, it has also brought into focus new opportunities that we can perhaps pursue. From your perspective, Dr. Maharaj, and you have written about this, you noted in a recent article that I read that the post-pandemic emphasis must be on fast-tracking recovery and building resilience. And you listed a number of different areas, including unlocking finance, optimizing new technologies, investing more in MSMEs, and so on. Could you give some further insight into this and how you look at this building better, more sustainable and inclusive economies?
Yeah, thank you so much, High Commissioner. I think we all are fully aware of the challenges that we face in the Caribbean. It's a time of immense challenge, but it's also a time of immense opportunity. And there have been many opportunities that have been created as a consequence of COVID-19. But the key to building resilience in the Caribbean, given our own challenges being highly indebted, governments with limited fiscal space, is the central importance of partnering with business and the private sector to create jobs and generate opportunities and prosperity for our people. And that, to my mind, is really vital going forward. And how do we use trade and investment and partnerships with a country, an important friend like Canada, to advance our resilience agenda? When I speak and emphasize the issues of trade and investment, I'm not speaking about ODA, nor am I asking or making a special plea for Canada to give additional ODA to the Caribbean, but it's about helping Caribbean people and helping Caribbean countries stand on their own 2 feet. And how do we do that? Is to get support from Canada, which has a long history in the area of technology, for example, and leveraging agriculture and agricultural technology to help us, given the fact that we have the most food insecure region on the planet. And this is a specific area where Canada can provide support to us. Our micro, small, and medium scale enterprises need to enter the age of digitalization and technology. Canada has a lot of expertise and experience in that area that can help us with a program of support. Again, it's helping Caribbean people and Caribbean countries stand on our own 2 feet, and not so much about ODA and seeking support just for the sake of seeking support. I would also want to emphasize that there are key opportunities in the non-tourism related sector. Around 50% of Caribbean countries in terms of GDP come from the tourism sector. But 9/11, Hurricanes Irma and Maria, and now the COVID-19 pandemic have all shown us the acute vulnerability that we have when we rely on one main economic sector. And that is precisely why we at the Caribbean Export Development Agency, we are focusing on non-tourism related services as the next frontier for Caribbean business. How do we tap into services, whether it's fashion, Caribbean fashion, the business of music, and areas where we have expertise to generate jobs, growth, and opportunity for Caribbean people. We want to also take advantage of CaribCan. We presently have a free trade agreement with Canada called CaribCan, which provides for around 99% of goods and services from the Caribbean going into Canada on a duty-free, quota-free, tariff-free basis. And we need to work closely with Canada so our business people can take advantage of those opportunities. But I want to also indicate quite clearly that it is a two-way street. It's not the Caribbean only seeking opportunities in Canada. Given our strong historical ties and connection, there are immense opportunities for Canadian business people to come to the Caribbean. Given the imperative of climate action and the importance of transitioning to a green economy and the excellent work Canada is doing and the Canadian private sector is doing in that area, there are also immense opportunities for the Canadian private sector in the Caribbean as we work together to create jobs, growth, and opportunity for our people. Doing the same old will not give us different results. So we really have to advance in an agenda to fast track recovery and build a resilient Caribbean in partnership with strong allies like Canada, which would provide benefits for Canadian people as well as our people here in the Caribbean.
I like how you articulated that, because as we talk about partnership, we're looking at what benefits both sides. This is not a one-way street. It goes both ways. And you mentioned tourism, which of course for the Caribbean is a number one industry for many of our countries, accounting for more than 50% of GDP. And this past year really has sort of shown the soft underbelly of the industry, which has reeled from the impact of the pandemic. And you're getting into a very important point, and that is in terms of building back stronger economies, that we have to look at non-traditional areas for business and investment. And Dr. Friday has been working in one of these areas, blue economy. So I'm going to throw this to him and get his take on where we can go from here in this area.
Thank you, High Commissioner. I think the first thing to realize is that, the Caribbean Sea actually binds us all together as a region. And that Caribbean Sea generates $407 billion per year, according to some work done by the World Bank back in 2016. So this is an area of great opportunity. Clearly, we're very much aware of that because a lot of our industry is related to the coastal area, which is on tourism. But as was pointed out by my colleague earlier, this is a sector which is hugely vulnerable. So we need to find ways to concentrically diversify the tourism sector. We could be doing a lot more, I think, working with Canada on, for example, medical tourism. There's a lot that we can be doing there to actually help Canada to reduce its healthcare expenditures by working with players in the medical and the tourism sector, so that medical and wellness tourism can become an important component of the tourism industry, which would be less vulnerable to cyclical vagaries of the market. So that's one area. I think another area is that of sustainable fisheries. Canada is well aware of what happens when fisheries are not managed sustainably. And this is a huge area and an area of growing importance. Just being able to have, a full audit trail of actually where and when fish were caught, and then getting that to the market. All of that needs to be supported by technologies, be it satellite technologies, electronic monitoring systems, and blockchain technologies, really to have that sort of full audit trail, so where the fish has come from, etc. Aquaculture now accounts for about half of the fish that we eat. And it's going to be important in the Caribbean that we also move to this area, because it's going to help to reduce pressure on the environment. And this is going to be important if we want to also have a robust tourism product. Blue biotechnology, I've already given the example of AZT, but there are thousands of new chemical entity and drug candidates coming out from the oceans. This can be an area where we can collaborate with Canada. All of that is going to need to have the financial infrastructure to be able to convert, to be able to move into some of these new areas. We know that the existing banking sector often risk averse, and therefore we need to put heads together to see how can we, for example, not only rely on debt financing, but how we can also move towards more equity funding, how we can harness the power of the internet for things like crowdfunding, etc. So the financial architecture is going to be very important if we want to diversify our economies, because we're moving into areas with a little bit more risk. Thank you.
Thank you. And I've made note of some of these because I'm sure that we as a group here, as CARICOM heads of mission in Ottawa, will be picking up on some of these. And certainly, we're already discussing with Canada some of the issues as it relates to sustainable fisheries. Medical and wellness tourism is perhaps something that we've not really delved into, but certainly as a tourism industry in the Caribbean is going through a period of rethinking in the wake of this pandemic. This is perhaps something that we can look at. And blue innovation is an exciting new area that you're working on, and Canada and the CARICOM countries, all being ocean states, you'd think that there would be opportunities for partnership there. So I think you put some really interesting things on the table for us to look at and to work on. Senator Moody, let's go to you. Because as we're thinking about building more inclusive economies, I know one of the areas that Canada has been very much focused on, and you've done a lot of work in this area, is working with women and girls and making sure that they're all represented in all fields. And Canada, of course, has a feminist international assistance policy. In the Caribbean, I learned this from Dr. Maharaj, about 40% of small businesses are owned by women. So, taking into account Canada's approach in terms of its international assistance policy, the engagement of women in the MSME field, how can we marry these two facts really to contribute more effectively to the new approach to building back?
Thank you, High Commissioner Tross. It's an important question from the perspective of as a priority for Canada. There is no question that we're seeing that the pandemic has set back the achievement of sustainable goals significantly, and as we move forward, we want to see projects supported and more focused on gender equality. The evidence is there that investing in gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls acts as a force multiplier on other developmental goals. And so development financing is much more impactful and sustainable when it's promoting gender equality and empowers women and girls. Looking at empowering women and girls as managers, traders, suppliers, producers, workers, and consumers will drive local business growth. The program you mentioned, the Feminist International Assistance Program, really takes into account, interestingly enough, that the traditional grant and contribution arrangements of the past have been used to achieve some progress, but that we really do need to commit to better leveraging the existing official development assistance, to mobilizing new streams of public and private financing, and using tools from across the innovative financial spectrum, pay for results structures, guarantees, equity, as one of our previous speakers spoke about, attracting new resources and partners to complement the existing financing, and increasing mechanisms that provide us with new approaches for pooling private and public resources to develop and scale up activities, creating initiatives with the private sector, public investment philanthropists, civil society, and other areas, investment ready and bankable sources, and generating positive social and economic benefits from these activities. There are a number of tools. I'm certainly not the expert in the financial tools that we can use, but focusing on some of the key areas of health technologies, green technologies, we need to find and use the more innovative and newer tools that harness a broader base of support, and are focused on women, are focused on access for women who are in many of our societies the backbone of our communities, and our homes and our lives, and advancing their access and engagement. So I think that that's one of the things that we as a country in Canada really need to focus on. And there is recognition in all activities that this is a direction that is necessary and is going in moving forward our partnership with the CARICOM companies. We can't capacity building, so that's going to be another really important aspect for the region. I'll stop there.
I know you can keep going because there's so much to cover.
There's so many aspects to this. Yes.
Absolutely. And this is an area that's near and dear to my heart. And then knowing all of the work that you've done over many years in this space, I'm sure you can keep going. But let's switch to another issue that's of paramount interest for us, and that is climate change. You know, every morning we wake up and we turn on the news, and it seems that there are examples of extreme weather conditions just everywhere, much of which appears to be linked to climate change. And so it's becoming increasingly obvious that no matter where you are, whether you're in a large country, a small country, whether you're a continent or an island, that we're all being affected by the same forces. Caribbean leaders have pointed to climate change as an issue that's existential for us. There's a big push to have a vulnerability index that can be factored into the development paradigm. Dr. Friday, you advise governments and businesses on many of these big issues. You've worked on the Green Climate Fund, you've chaired AOSIS. Can you talk to us about that and give us some insight on how we can collaborate more effectively, Canada and CARICOM, to address these issues?
Well, you mentioned one of the sort of major challenges around financing and global finance from the multilateral development institution. That is the idea of a vulnerability index. And the thinking is that a lot of the Caribbean countries have become middle-income countries and therefore don't have full access to either. That's a highly concessional funding at the World Bank and other forms of highly concessional funding. Some countries, Grenada and others, for example, qualify for what you call IDA blend. But because they're not low-income countries any longer, they no longer get that highly concessional funding. But the issue is that they're still hugely vulnerable to climate change. I think a lot of work's been done in this area by the Commonwealth, by the World Bank themselves, UNDP, and the OECD. There's been a tremendous amount of talk, I think, and even goodwill to try to help to untangle this. But, you know, as we've seen, you know, even with ideas like, for example, the what's called the hurricane clause. So the hurricane clause, very quickly, is the idea that if I owe you money and we have a major event, a hurricane, for example, that we can have a moratorium on repayments in that event. And, you know, you'd be surprised, you know, while it was easy to get, not easy, but you know, while in a country like Grenada, we were able to get, for example, you know, private sector bondholders to accept the hurricane clause sort of going forward. Much more difficult with, you know, with the donor community. And that comes as a surprise. And I think this is one of the areas where Canada's voice you know, could be quite strong. The challenge with climate change, of course, in the Caribbean is that although we contribute very little to you know, to carbon dioxide, we're sort of the canaries in the coal mine. If you take 2017 as an example, you know, $9 billion worth of damages across a number of islands within 4 weeks from 4 successive, highly powerful hurricanes. What we're seeing now is that climate impacts are becoming much more global. So we've seen what's happening in China, what's happening in Europe recently with all of the floods. So there's a danger that this turns into sort of each country for themselves, and that people forget about the particular vulnerabilities that we have on climate change. So this is one of the reasons why the Caribbean Climate Smart Accelerator was established. And we need to be doing a lot more on accelerating adaptation in particular. The business case for renewable energy is a lot easier to make because we're paying so much for imported fossil fuels. And at the same time, the cost of solar and wind are coming down. So that's a much easier business case. The business case for resilience, for coastal resilience, for resilient low-income housing, that's much more difficult. And I think this is where we need a particular energy and focus around the idea of an adaptation accelerator to help the Caribbean to work through some of these issues and problems. So that would be one of the recommendations I would make for the partnership between the Caribbean and Canada, is a particular focus on an adaptation accelerator. We're doing some very good work with the Global Center for Adaptation based in the Netherlands. And I think this is part of the conversation that they would very much welcome having with Canada and CARICOM.
And it's a conversation that CARICOM would very much welcome. Dr. Maharaj, you've worked around the world. You've worked in Africa, you've worked in Europe, the United States, the Caribbean. What is your perspective on this?
Yeah, my perspective is that the Caribbean, like the Pacific, is one of the most climate vulnerable regions on the planet. So that's factual. And I also like to quote John Maynard Keynes. And Keynes said, in the long run, we're all dead. And the issue here is that on the issue of vulnerability index, I think it's a good thing. On making the case for concessional financing, we need to do this. But I've been involved in this work for many years and many others before me, and we continue to make the case. But not much change is really taking place. And therefore, what do we need to do concretely and practically? Because we are facing a peril that's not next year or the following year or sometime in the future, but that's a peril for us at this very moment. And therefore, that is why it's so important that we have to leverage the technologies and the expertise available in countries like Canada. Canada is accorded the highest priority to a green economy transition. We need to do the same in the Caribbean. And how do we bring the private sector to bring the expertise, their financing, and their support to partner with Caribbean enterprises to do precisely this? The senator spoke eloquently about the emphasis of Canada in terms of supporting women, and that's a good thing and a step in the right direction. 40% of Caribbean micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises are owned by women. But we need to make sure that when we pivot and we transition to a green economy, businesses would go along as well. So we need to have a very specific support program for micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises to embrace a green economy transition as well. I think what is important to underline is that to achieve the SDGs, of which climate change and climate action is an important and essential part, SDG 13, it has been estimated that the cost of achieving the SDGs is around 5 to 7 trillion United States dollars. And for developing countries, the cost is like between 2.4 to around 2.8 trillion United States dollars. As much as we would like to get concessional financing, the practical reality is that the concessional financing, even if obtained, will not be sufficient to enable us to have climate action or to meet the sustainable development goals. That's why focusing on a trade and investment agenda, allowing Caribbean people to stand on our own 2 feet, I think is essential. And having such an approach with business playing an important leadership role is good for the Caribbean, but it's also good for Canada. And it reflects, I think, the best of a partnership as we seek to build resilience and to create opportunities for our people here in the Caribbean and for Canadians as well.
Okay, Senator Modi, would you like to jump in here?
There is one comment that I'd make that I'll add to what the previous speakers have said, which is that we are also in Canada experiencing these extreme weather patterns and having the disastrous forest fires and melting Arctic, all of which we are adjusting to with an increased forcefulness and approach to climate resiliency and climate protection. And I think that is where our partnership, not only in the hard and concrete ways that you spoke about, Mr. Maharaj, but in terms of also the partnership in terms of advocacy. We have an opportunity here to partner as a country with a region, Canada and the CARICOM countries, to lead the international community and to push towards meaningful action. I think that we have an obligation to continue our work, both in terms of capacity exchange, technical exchange, and so on, to strengthen climate resiliency. And we need to start to think about new and emerging issues such as climate refugees and what that may look like for us and our regions in the future.
Okay, and you're heading into some of the global issues that I want to address right now. And let's look at Canada CARICOM in the multilateral space. Later this year in October, Barbados will be hosting UNCTAD under the theme Aligning the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development with the Global New Normal created by the COVID-19 global pandemic. And of course, in November, there's COP26 in Glasgow. Dr. Maharaj, you've been the Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth, among other many senior posts that you've held. Perhaps you can share with us your thoughts on how CARICOM and Canada can work together in international fora to advance effectively some of those areas in which we have common interests. You're on mute.
Yeah. Sorry about that. Just reflecting on the point that Senator Modi said and made, I think it's not only about the hard and concrete issues on the trade and investment agenda, but it's how we can partner with Canada as a G20 country as well in the international community to advocate the issues that are really critical to us. And closely connected to that is the work that's going to happen when the UNCTAD Ministerial will be taking place here in Bridgetown, Barbados, though virtually. For us, SIDS, for example, small island developing states, we continue to be eclipsed and marginalized in the international trading system. I mean, when you look at the data, the contribution of Caribbean trade, CARICOM, Caribbean countries' contribution to global trade, we actually declining. Our trade around maybe 15 years ago as a percentage of total global trade would be around 0.75 or around 0.75%. That has declined now to around 0.48 or less than half of 1%. And you take away Trinidad and Tobago, our contribution to global trade accounts around 0.23 to 0.24 or less than a quarter of 1%. And therefore, for countries like us in the Caribbean, it is so critical that the international trading architecture gives the treatment to us that recognizes the particular vulnerabilities that we face as small island developing states. To my mind, that's a big and priority issue. A second important issue has to do with financing, and financing for the trade and investment agenda, enabling our business community to be able to stand on their own 2 feet and to have development assistance focused on these areas. And the third platform really has to be to ensure that we work with a country like Canada and team up with other vulnerable regions like the Pacific, so we have a greater voice internationally to advocate on these issues. Because time is really of the essence, and the time to talk is essentially over, and the time to act is actually now.
Thank you for that sense of urgency. I'll throw the same question to Dr. Friday and Senator Moody, if either of you would like to chime in on this.
Well, Dr. Moody.
Go ahead first.
I think the world has changed fundamentally as a result of COVID, and it's very important that we recognize these changes and that we adapt to what a new world is going to look like going forward. Clearly, the days of people commuting to work, traveling around the world for conferences, we see as we are meeting now, the ability to exchange information through Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and platforms such as this one that we're using, that technology is basically allowing us to digitize much of what we have to offer as a region. So we need to think about this new discontinuity as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to connect our people to the global economy. And it's an opportunity to get more and more of our cultural products and services, for example, out into the global market. So this is a fundamental shift in the way we think about trade, for example. And I'm sure Dr. Maharaj and his colleagues are looking at this. And you did mention this earlier, Dr. Maharaj, the need for us to get, for example, our creative industries out there. So I think that there's a new shift that has come, and we need to figure out how the Caribbean is best poised to take full advantage of that in this new era of digitization. The first time I went to a COP was back in Bali in 2007. And I remarked at the end of that, well, given what we've achieved here, we didn't need to fly 12,000 people to Bali. We could have done this by email. I think it's a very flippant remark, but I do think that there's a lot more we can be doing in terms of international agreements and so on, using the digital space, because it allows us to speed up the iterations to reach international agreement. If you have to wait every year to have a COP, and every quarter, every half year to have intersessionals, the speed of change and the rate of change is going to be that much slower. We need to figure out how we can use this new digital era thrown into to speed up these international agreements and our ability to find common ground in the multilateral arena.
Okay, so we're running out of time. We have about 3 minutes left, so I'm going to use moderator's prerogative, and I'm going to give everybody a chance here to close out. And let me throw this at all three of you. We have elections coming up in various countries in the Caribbean in the next 12 months. We'll probably have elections here in Canada sometime soon. If you had the ears of policymakers and business leaders in all of these countries, what would be your recommendations to them now for what they can do that will have the most constructive and impactful kind of consequence for the Canada-CARICOM relationship? And within this scope, think about how the diaspora and if the diaspora can be a part of that. Let's go with Senator Moody.
Thank you, Madam Moderator Chair. So my thoughts in this area that Canada must continue to work with the CARICOM nations as a central piece of our foreign policy moving forward. I'd impress on our government that the relationship with CARICOM region should be a priority, should remain a priority, and that we should continue to build and invest in our partnership within the region. We have talked about health security, about pursuing innovative finance initiatives, new frameworks for evaluating countries for financing, about building climate resiliency and supporting climate change mitigation. Canada must continue to target the poorest and the most vulnerable and to prioritize gender equality outcomes, and particularly the empowerment of women and girls in developing countries. I believe that there are some of the key areas for ongoing focus. We have a long-standing and valuable relationship with the CARICOM nations, and that we must continue to invest the time and energy on the current path, building stronger ties in the region. In terms of the diaspora, very quickly, the diaspora is a really valuable and important community for our two regions. They provide a strong connection and a first-hand understanding of the problems that their families and their friends and their communities face back home, and they can identify and help us identify as policymakers the needs that these communities have. And at the grassroots level, they will continue to provide significant support for recovery through traditional giving, equipment, money and clothing, for example. And I'm seeing more and more sharing of expertise on a voluntary basis, capacity building, volunteering, for example, around medical care provision and so on.
Thank you. And Dr. Maharaj?
Yeah, I just to echo similar sentiments to those expressed by the senator. I think there are just 4 points I wanted to make. One is that e-commerce and having a program of support and collaboration in the area of e-commerce for businesses in the Caribbean, I think is vital. Secondly, I spoke about the importance of transitioning to a green economy, and we can leverage Canadian technology and know-how in this particular area, because this is not an option for us in the Caribbean. It's an imperative, and Canada has a much to offer. There's much we can gain from Canada, and much Canadian business people can benefit as well through a program of support in this area. The third point is really micro, small, and medium scale enterprises. They form the backbone of Caribbean economies. 40% are owned by women, and we need to help these enterprises transition to this digital age. And again, there's a lot of expertise we can benefit from Canada. The final point has to do with the diaspora. I have a very different view in terms of how we leverage our diaspora. You know, when you compare the Caribbean to Asia, a lot of the remittances go into investment-related activities. In the Caribbean, we get a huge amount of remittances. Trinidad and Tobago, around 2 years ago, 190 million US per year. Jamaica is over 2.4 billion. Haiti is around 2 billion United States dollars per year. Guyana, around 365 million United States dollars a year. But in the Caribbean, the remittances go invariably into consumption-related activities. So we have to engage with our diaspora. So our diaspora, they become investors and stakeholders in a common future for our Caribbean people, where we can work together to create jobs and opportunity for members of our diaspora and also Caribbean people. Thank you so much, High Commissioner, to you and your team for an excellent session.
Oh, thank you. Dr. Friday?
I think the greatest challenge we face as a region, and I think as a global community right now, is misinformation related to COVID and related to vaccinations. And the political risk that countries need to take to get more and more people vaccinated is quite high, and therefore it makes sense for the region, for Canada and others to come together on the whole issue of vaccinations. If people do not get vaccinated, we cannot get our economies back on the road again. And this is a serious problem. And we see now that we have more people have access to smartphones, etc. But the sources that they're choosing to believe information from, I think is causing a problem. So I think governments need to come together to recognize misinformation as a serious threat to the economies and to find ways to counteract this, and particularly in things that are not as non-political as as COVID. Actions need to be underpinned by the science, and that's something that can be very easy to determine and ascertain. To give countries the political will that they need to have in order to encourage more and more people to get vaccinated, so that we can get past this sort of economic lethargy that we see affecting the planet. Thank you.
Oh, thank you all for participating and sharing with us some really great insights and making some very useful recommendations that we will be looking at. And thank you, of course, to the audience. And there have been some really interesting comments that we shall also review. And so to close out this session, I'll kick it off to my colleague, Andre Padmore from Barbados, to wrap up the session. Andre. You're on mute.
Thank you, Dean. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor to express the sincere gratitude on behalf of the CARICOM Heads of Mission here in Canada to the many actors who have ensured that this event today was a success. We express our gratitude to Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Rob Oliphant, for his message, which underscored the value of the Canada-Caribbean relationship. To the panelists, Senator the Honorable Rosemary Moody, Dr. Angus Friday, Dr. Deodat Maharaj, who have reconfirmed the importance of the CARICOM-Canada relationship through a discussing a sample of critical priority issues, namely health and health security, tourism and diversification, the management of the blue economy, climate change, and financing for development. Your dialogue has reinforced the mutually beneficial nature of the continued CARICOM-Canada cooperation. You have offered pointed observations as to how this relationship can grow from strength to strength. Indeed, it is clear that in this partnership, the region has a significant role to play in advancing these areas of common interest. I am especially heartened to hear your discourse on the use of technology, the inclusion of the private sector and other key stakeholders, including the diaspora, as integral elements of assuring long-lasting solutions. For many of our societies, women issues are tied directly to our country's development agenda. We thank you. To the heads of missions, in particular the Dean, Her Excellency Sherry Tross, High Commissioner Sharon Miller, we, the other members of the team, take this opportunity to thank you for your exemplary leadership. Our sincere appreciation also goes out to the officers of each mission for their dedicated efforts. To the technical team, without you, this policy forum would not have been a success. We are indeed grateful for your expertise and professionalism. We know that you spent many hours assiduously working behind the scenes. To our viewers, we are indeed very grateful for your support. This forum would not be complete without your attendance, and we sincerely hope that you will share the video with your friends and family throughout the region. On behalf of the CARICOM Corps here in Canada, I express our sincere gratitude. Thank you.
From many distant lands, our forefathers came, some seeking adventure, some bound in chains. Through battles waged and fought, through victory and pain, by test of their courage, our freedom was gained. In homage to those gone before us, the heroes of lands in the sun, we vow to join hands and to focus on building one Caribbean. Raise your voices high, sing of your Caribbean pride. Sing it loud and strong, feel our hearts beat as one. Celebrate in song as we rise to heights where we belong. Sound the victory drum for CARICOM. Though great and diverse be our ethnicities, the bonds that unite us are stronger than these. We dine, we pray, we love, we dance and we play. We relate to each other, we'll rest in your way. Today as a people united, determined and steadfast we stand. We look to a brand new horizon, the future now firmly in our hands. Raise your voice.